And now, it's story time.
While the world looked outward, perhaps the truth was always there, inside the room, beside the empty crib. And what if the most glaring clue was ignored by everyone from day one? Do you remember the day you first heard the name Madeleine McCann? That little blonde 3-year-old girl who disappeared while sleeping in a resort in Portugal. It was 2007, and suddenly the whole world stopped. Headlines, campaigns, interviews. Everyone was looking for a culprit, but always looking outward. It was as if evil could only come from outside. An unknown kidnapper, a stranger lurking by the window, a hidden predator, invisible, dangerous. Meanwhile, at the center of the storm were the parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, portrayed as symbols of suffering. They were doctors, British, respected, a family destroyed by a tragedy no one dared question. But what if the evil did not come from outside? What if, from the beginning, the most important clue was inside that apartment, right next to the empty crib? It's an uncomfortable thought, almost unacceptable, because it challenges what we want to believe. It defies the logic that father and mother always fight for the truth, always seek justice, always tell everything. But sometimes they don't. And here's the real dilemma. When the truth is too harsh, the mind creates a version we can handle, a version with external villains, a noble cause, a legitimate pain, but one that hides something that can't be said aloud. And maybe, just maybe, Madeleine's story is more about what was silenced than what was shouted to the world. While the entire world searched for a kidnapper out there, one piece of evidence emerged. Actually, two trained sniffer dogs, one to detect the scent of human blood, the other to detect the scent of a cadaver. They were brought to the McCann's apartment, both alerted to the same spot, behind the living room sofa, then in the bedroom, then in the trunk of a car rented by the parents themselves days after the disappearance. One of the dogs also indicated the presence of blood on Kate's clothing. That would have been a devastating turning point in any investigation, but in the McCann case, it was ignored. The official explanation? Technical errors. The British media? It went silent. Part of the Portuguese police, however, began to see the case differently, but that change in perspective did not last. The family's status carried more weight. They were doctors, respected parents, upper middle-class British in a foreign country. It was easier to believe the dogs were wrong than to think the parents might be hiding something. This is the point many refuse to face. What if the truth never emerged, not because of a lack of evidence, but because it was socially more acceptable to discard it? The idea that evil lives inside the home is still unacceptable to many. But perhaps that's precisely why no one wanted to look closely. From the start, there was extreme care taken to protect the McCann's image. The disappearance of their daughter became a public tragedy, but with a very well-defined narrative. Shocked parents, supportive friends, a sympathetic press. But some details didn't add up. Kate didn't cry publicly. She called the British press before officially notifying the police. She avoided doing a reconstruction of the events. She refused to answer dozens of questions from the Portuguese investigators. Simple details, timelines, movements, actions, were evaded or answered with generic phrases. And yet all this was seen as a grief reaction. Grief became a shield, but the truth is that the parents' behavior deviated from common emotional expectations, and that alone should have raised more suspicion. Yet no one wanted to go down that path. Why? Because it was more comfortable to maintain the image of the perfect family, because accusing the parents would be morally unbearable, because admitting that possibility would require changing the entire narrative built from the start. So the problem wasn't just the investigation, it was collective, social, a refusal to admit that evil might have come from within, an unconscious choice to believe the version that fit what everyone wanted to hear, and perhaps that choice made the truth disappear along with Madeleine. In 1980, Australia was shaken by a case. Lindy Chamberlain was accused of killing her own baby during a camping trip. She swore a dingo had taken the child. She was arrested, tried, and convicted. Years later, she was exonerated. The baby really had been taken by a wild animal. But what if, with the McCanns, it's the opposite? What if what was excused as coldness is actually a revealing trait? What if the silence is more than grief? What if it's a way to hide what no one has the courage to say? From now on, we're going to look at what many refuse to see: the inconsistencies, the silences, and the behaviors that might say more than words. And why, even with so many strange clues, the truth may have been ignored for being simply unacceptable. Oh, and if you want to go all the way with me down this line of thought, take a moment to subscribe. What comes next will make everything even clearer and far more uncomfortable. It was just after 10 p.m. when Kate McCann returned to apartment 5A at the Ocean Club and sensed something was wrong. The bedroom door slightly ajar, the window wide open, the curtains blowing in the wind, and the crib empty. She ran downstairs and told her friends in a firm voice. They took her. But who? How did she know someone had taken her? Wouldn't it be more logical to think the girl had walked out on her own? That she might be hiding? The immediate use of "they took her" was the first sign this story wasn't going to follow a normal path. In the first moments after Madeleine's disappearance, the scene was already compromised. Several people came in and out of the apartment before the police arrived. Objects were touched. No perimeter was established. The family itself made calls to England before even alerting the local authorities. Soon, the British press jumped in. Heart-wrenching headlines, family photos, a national mobilization, and the narrative was swiftly built. A kidnapping, a child taken by a stranger while she slept, grieving parents, a support network. The villain was out there, the McCann couple at the center of suffering. But something bothered the Portuguese investigators. They began to notice inconsistencies in the parents' behavior, a calmness that seemed rehearsed, an odd emotional distance, especially from the mother. Kate's refusal to answer dozens of police questions, her refusal to participate in a reenactment of the disappearance. None of this was proof of guilt, but it raised a doubt. Why did the media turn the McCanns' pain into absolute truth so quickly, while the investigation's details weren't even clear? Behind the scenes, a quiet war developed between the Portuguese police and the British press. On one side, investigators asking for caution. On the other, reporters demanding quick answers, yet always starting from the premise that the parents were innocent. This difference in posture directly impacted the investigation. Any tougher question posed to the McCanns was seen by the media as cruelty. Any suspicion became defamation, and the local police were portrayed as incompetent, slow, outdated. It was as if the world had decided beforehand who the victims were and who could not be questioned. But the McCanns' behavior did not help. Kate avoided interviews with the authorities but agreed to television appearances. When asked why they had left 3 children alone at night, the answer was vague. It was what we thought was safe at the time. Even so, public empathy grew, and part of that has a reason no one likes to face: social status. Jerry and Kate were doctors, educated, British, well-dressed. A couple considered the good guys. This built an invisible barrier around them, an emotional shield, a collective feeling that they couldn't be wrong. Even as inconsistent details called ambiguous loss comes in. It's when you grieve over a loss without being certain of what you've actually lost. In this case, the absence of a body, the lack of a definitive explanation, generated a grief that didn't allow for tough questions. To question the parents was almost like assaulting people already destroyed inside. But what if that grief, that silence, and that public image were precisely being used to hide something? The answer might lie where no one wanted to look, and that's exactly where we're going next. The days following Madeleine's disappearance were a blend of public outpouring and private chaos. The Portuguese police tried to piece together the facts. The British press seemed more focused on preserving the family's image of sorrow. The first big break came with the arrival of the British sniffer dogs. One was specialized in detecting the scent of a corpse, the other in finding traces of human blood. They didn't know where they were. They didn't know whose house it was. But within minutes, they reacted. First in the living room, behind the sofa, exactly where, according to investigators, a fall could have occurred. Then in the parents' bedroom. And finally in the trunk of the car, the McCanns rented 2 weeks after the disappearance. The dogs' reactions weren't subjective. They were recorded on video. An indisputable piece of evidence? Not necessarily, but a strong indication. strong enough for the police to reconsider everything. It was the turning point in the investigation. But what happened next was unexpected. Instead of delving deeper into this new line of inquiry, the investigators came under pressure. British diplomacy got involved, subtly at first through consular contacts. Then more directly, the British ambassador met with Portuguese authorities. Within the investigation, a split emerged. On one side, those who wanted to pursue the new leads. On the other, those who said pointing suspicion at the parents would be politically disastrous. The media took the second group's side, and Jerry and Kate, when confronted with the dog's findings, they reacted calmly. Kate, according to reports, seemed too composed. She said it was absurd. There was no shock, no outrage, just firm denial, as if that hypothesis had already been anticipated. While suspicions grew within the police, outside, the family's narrative gained traction. Emotional interviews, organized trips, meetings with the Pope, Kate clutching Madeleine's teddy bear, always in front of the cameras. Jerry measured, repeating the same lines. "We want to find our daughter. We won't rest." And the public believed them. Why? Because it was all part of a much larger mechanism. A mechanism called confirmation bias. When you believe something and really want it to be true, your brain starts ignoring any information that contradicts it and unwittingly reinforces only data that confirms your belief. It was easier to believe the parents were victims than to admit they might be involved. After all, who would do that to their own daughter? But the case wasn't about a premeditated crime. The developing theory inside the investigation was of an accident, a mistake, a lapse in supervision, and an attempt to cover it up before it became irreversible. The manipulation of the crime scene supports that. The bed where Madeleine slept was too tidy. No sign of a struggle, no pillow out of place. Almost as if someone had prepared everything to look normal, to divert attention. Furthermore, Kate's behavior was unsettling. She wore the same jacket for days, a small detail, until the dogs reacted precisely to the scent on that jacket. Coincidence? Maybe. But the accumulation of coincidences was forming a pattern. And even so, when the police tried to get the parents to do a reconstruction, they refused, without hesitation. They said they saw no point, and they continued their public schedule. It was as if the story had already been written, as if the official version was so well protected that any attempt to question it was treated as a personal attack, not as an investigation. And that's how, without anyone saying it aloud, the truth started slipping away. Up to this point, everything revolved around speculation. The media pushed the kidnapping angle. The Portuguese police tried to keep other hypotheses open, and the public chose what it wanted to believe. But now it's time to shift the lens. What emerged over time, without any official conclusion, is that the real obstacle to the truth might not have been missing data, but the silence that enveloped everything. Not just any silence, a calculated silence, active, constructed, and that construction had a name, a face, and a demeanor. Kate and Jerry, when confronted with uncomfortable questions, would give generic answers. They avoided details, always contained. When asked about inconsistencies in the Tapas Group's statements, Jerry simply said, "This is not the time to look to the past. We need to find Madeleine." The phrase became a mantra, but it also became a curtain. Behind it, no one looked where they needed to look. Here's the turning point. What if the secret was never a missing clue, but the fact that everyone, police, media, society, refused to consider one possibility, that the parents could be directly involved, not out of malice, perhaps out of desperation, an accident, a frantic attempt to protect their children, their image, their own sanity. And from there, a lie constructed not out of pleasure, but out of fear. As in the John Benet Ramsey case in the United States, society preferred the comfort of a distant theory rather than facing the discomfort of suspecting the family itself. Disturbing theories were ignored, and anyone who insisted on them was sidelined, silenced, or ridiculed. Here we reach something even more delicate, the idea that what we call truth is often decided by those who have the power to tell it. Philosopher Michel Foucault said it's not only what is spoken that matters. What is left unsaid, what is silenced, erased, omitted, also shapes reality. And the McCann case became an example of that. In this case, The truth may have been swallowed by a collective choice to keep public grief within a bearable narrative. After all, what's easier to accept? A child kidnapped by an invisible stranger? Or the idea that something happened that night and was hidden? The family's silence, the media's protection, the diplomatic pressure all built a wall. And that wall not only blocked answers, it blocked questions, it turned legitimate suspicions into taboos. But the most striking thing is realizing that silence remains. Years later, no one has been arrested, no body has been found, no confession has appeared, and still, we all sense there's something unspoken hanging in the air, a discomfort that never went away. That leads us to a final image. Imagine a house with one locked door. The key isn't lost. It's been there all along, inside the house itself. But no one has the courage to use it. Maybe because they fear what they'll find, or because they know that once opened, nothing can be hidden again. That's the real tragedy. Not just the disappearance of a child, but the possibility that the answer was always inside that house and no one wanted to face it. You know what gets me about this case? It's not just the mystery, not just the missing evidence or the inconsistent statements, it's the silence. Because silence, when it comes from those who should speak the most, weighs differently. And in this case, it's not accidental. It's been maintained, reinforced, and, in a way, accepted. We grow up believing every story has two sides, but when only one side speaks and the other stays closed behind locked doors, that's where the danger lies. Because maybe what we call truth isn't always what was discovered, but what was permitted to be told. And in Madeleine's case, the key to everything may have stayed inside that house the entire time. Intact, silent, waiting for someone to have the courage to use it. It's just that sometimes the truth is so uncomfortable that nobody wants to be the first to unlock it. If you've made it this far, it's because you also feel something is out of place in this story. And if you're the kind of person who likes to go beyond the surface, there's something in the first pinned comment that might help you. It's a reading recommendation that deals precisely with how we handle grief, guilt, and collective denial. All the things that hover around cases like this. I won't give you the title here so as not to spoil the experience, but I assure you, what you'll find there can change how you look at these stories, and maybe even some things about yourself. Now, if you like narratives that stir you up, make you uneasy, and reveal what almost nobody dares to say.
In addition, YouTube's algorithm prioritizes videos with many likes and subscriptions. So, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like and subscribe buttons to help more people see and know about this content. Thank you for watching and listening.